Good morning, everybody. Welcome into your FreightWaves Now Community Spotlight on this Thursday morning. We've got Thomas Wasson here talking all things loaded and rolling. And if you caught Monday's Community Spotlight, you heard me talking with Mike Baudendistel about eventually talking with Thomas Wasson. Well, you guys had that conversation this week. The crossover that nobody expected, but everybody wanted. Loaded and rolling meets the stock out. How was your time with Mike, Thomas?
Oh, that was fun. Mike asks great questions, by
He
the
does.
way. Very detailed, very meticulous. I had to do my homework. That's right. I normally like to, just like all allegedly gifted kids, I'd like to skip on that part. But actually, it was a great conversation because I had to actually use some of my skill set in terms of how shippers need to treat their carriers. Because normally I'm here shilling for trucks, and I'm like, dang you darn shippers. But then I get to change my hat. I get to put on my different bowling shirt, so to speak, and then I can talk about how shippers can evaluate the carriers because it's like circles of hate. Each party is trying to get something from another.
Yeah, it was a really great conversation. And if you missed it, you can go watch the stock out on our YouTube channel or go find it on a podcast player of your choice. But you guys really got into the nitty gritty about how CPG shippers, Mike basically took the position of a CPG shipper and was coming at you like they were carrier vetting you, basically. And they were trying to find your services, or he was trying to find your service and kind of learn a little bit about what you were offering in this market. And as I mentioned with him, CPG shippers have really been put through the ringer because they have not had a choice on if they want to continue to ship their goods or not. Their goods are things that people need continuously, so they really haven't had a choice. They've had to get creative with their solutions when it comes to navigating the tough market. From the carrier perspective, what were some of your pro tips for that CPG shipper that Mike was pretending to be when it comes to, okay, this is someone good for me, this is someone not good for me?
Well, at the end of the day, the first things are going to be service levels, and also price, but mostly servicing. So you have typically CPG shippers will have a combination of carriers. You have your incumbent, which is your primary, waterfall theory of freight, secondary, tertiary, and so on and so forth down the RFP. The tips moving forward that I gave Mike, the biggest thing is that if you're a very well-run CPG shipper, or if you've been around a while, you already have a core set of carriers that you're working with. You're having conversations weekly about service, about tender compliance rates. You're working together. And I think the biggest takeaway right now is that carriers, when this market turns, are going to also rank you, but you just don't know it. So, just like a CPG shipper will have maybe a Prime or US Express or Knight as my primary, well, you may not be that number one in the Knight, Swift, or US Express. You may be second or third. Now, I knew this operationally because when I was a load planner, we would have a list of who needs to get prioritized either by the week or by customer thing. So knowing what you are, if you're a shipper of choice, are you somebody who needs to save a lot of money? And if you are, don't be surprised if your service is bad when the market shifts, or if you're a quality one, you keep your rates higher, you work with your carriers, you should be okay. But it's always that price, service, and kind of pecking order.
You say that, and it brings to mind an image of Regina George with the burn book, writing down, she's biding her time. She's waiting till the market turns. And Regina's a carrier in this perspective. And the girls that she's writing about are all the shippers, and she's eventually, when the market turns, she's going to romp into the world of all the shippers and then just like toss out the burn book pages and be like, this one doesn't give my drivers bathrooms, and this one's always late unloading my freight, and reveal all that information. Not necessarily the case. It's way less dramatic than that. But that is kind of the reality, right? Is that you treat your carriers well during difficult times, and then they take care of you when the market goes into their favor. What do CPG shippers really do to take care of their carriers, though? Like, where are they making sure that they are like core value caring for the people who are moving their freight?
It actually can get more dramatic. I've threatened customers before. I've said first, don't steal the trailers. Don't use the trailers as storage. You may think that I give you 50 trailers. That needs to turn. So that means that 50 trailers, I'm probably running about 10, 15 loads per week at a 3-to-1 turn ratio. What'll happen is, if you're a bad CPG shipper, you're holding extra ones, and then you're making my drivers bobtail out. I will remember you. I will bobtail back in, and if you ask for more trailers, I will deny them, and you need to unload your trailers. Because it's speed. The name of the game is speed. I never threatened that they were like detaining them and stuff, but that's the first step. The second step is, are you tendering at a regular amount of time? So for instance, if you told me you're giving me 50 loads per week out of Oklahoma, out of Lawton, let's say Goodyear Tire, out of Lawton, I need my 50 because I'm expecting you to deliver. Now, don't you give me 25 and say, I don't have any more for you, and then you're tendering it down to another carrier, because carriers get that way. They get a little, they're thinking, they're scheming. Who's scheming on me? So yes, those are the two biggest factors: is make sure that if you have trailer pool set up, you're actually utilizing the equipment, respecting the carrier's time, you're actually tendering the commitments that you have. But at the same time, as a carrier, if they're doing those two things right, treat them well. Pick up the loads. Communicate. If it's a preload drop and hook and I do have an extra few days on it, I can drop it at a yard, but I'm going to communicate and be proactive about it. And then finally, I think rate is a thing, but typically operationally that's handled by an outside sales VP. Like when I worked at US Express, I didn't give a crap about the rate. I was just here to make sure a truck was assigned to a load or my driver got miles. So, you also have to know that's where we have these disconnects, is because those differences in terms of what looks good on paper. So maybe a CPG shipper on an RFP, and then operationally, it turns out it was really bad and there was never any real communication.
So speaking of rates, because you guys did have a little bit of a conversation about that on Monday, what are we looking at right now when it comes to the current environment? We know that spot rates are still kind of just like, contract rates are kind of just like, but there's like some hope in the end of the summer doldrums. Is that still the case? And does that put maybe an excited taste in the carrier's mouths?
Excited in that you're getting screwed less. Low single-digit rate cuts are flat, depending upon who you ask on the recent earnings calls. 2 or 3 executives said that we have not accepted rate cuts, or we would rather cut back commitments. That's another thing we're hearing. They can say they didn't take rate cuts, they just took less volume and they moved themselves down a peg. So that's one instance where we'll see this. I'm gonna get a little spicy here. I think the freight brokers are the ones that are at most risk. A carrier knows their fixed cost, and we've seen it where they will just find other customers. So I'm gonna switch. Like, I love Goodyear Tire, good people. US Express dropped them as a customer because you know what they did? They actually, and this was back in 19, so don't you get on to me. Nobody reach out to me. I don't want any hate mail. The challenge is when you change your customer mix, maybe the tire customer now becomes a CPG customer. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not like anyone flipped each other the bird. It was more an instance where, like, bleep that out, by the way. It's more of an instance where it no longer fit the mix. So if you're a CPG customer, I told Mike about this as well, know that you may be swapped out if you're also just being, very difficult, if that makes any sense.
And that's actually a really good point, because I asked Mike, I said, if you are the carrier, if you are the shipper, or if you are the broker, where is the best place to be right now? And he had a different take. He said that the carrier is the best place to be because you quite literally have very little to lose right now. Like, you're sitting there and you're waiting and you're like, okay, this situation, as you mentioned, can't really get worse than it has been over the last 6 months. So they're just in this good spot, just waiting for the market to turn. He said that the shipper is the one that he thinks has the most to lose. But I think that that's an interesting take, that you think that the broker is the one that's sitting on the precipice.
Because I think, now I would say the shipper is a close second if they're using more brokerage. We talked about with Mike, brokers have got more penetration. They're finally getting a seat at the table because of COVID. Instead of 10% of the contract RFP, 30, 40%. So they get access. But can you keep it? That's the thing we haven't seen yet, by the way. It was so bad because of COVID. Shippers gave you a shot. But when I was a broker, what happens when I'm $500 underwater per load because my RFP was in Q1 of this year and the market's flipped to where I'm $500? They're going to hand it back, or they go out of business. And so that's the big what if. So yeah, the shipper, by proximity, getting the broker screwing over the shipper means the shipper's the second most screwed position. But the brokerage is because, or the carrier, I know my costs. It's a fixed cost. It's 2 something, whatever they put out. But as a brokerage, I live and die by the rip, by the margin. And so there is a very big fear because the carriers that brokers rely on are not idiots, and they may treat the broker like a trucker will treat with a carrier, and they'll go with a TQL instead of a CH. Or maybe they won't go with Coyote, they'll go with RXO. Bada bing, bada boom. And, when they say they have all that capacity, is it really your capacity, or are we just trucks with benefits?
Oh, there you go. I think there's the title of your next newsletter right there. Well, Thomas, thanks for joining us here this morning. Of course, you can find Loaded and Rolling the show Tuesday afternoons, Loaded and Rolling the newsletter on Thursdays right here on FreightWaves.com. We'll catch up with you, not next week because you're on vacation. Where are you going?
Yep. Oh, staycation. I had a tree fall on my house. I got to deal with that. I'm going to finally get caught up on adulting. So then I'll just screw it up another 6 months and we'll try it again.
There you go. All right, Thomas, thanks for that. We will see you later on.